Um, this is the semester 5, and I'll be teaching you today the vulnerable sections of society and understanding their issues. So, in our first chapter, we have the issues relating to children. How the childrens are vulnerable section. How the children are coming under the vulnerable section of the society. We will be discussing that. There is an objective introduction and definition, and all some major issues and the legal aspects about that to prevent them from this. So, without any delay, we will start the session today. So, um, before that, I would like to tell you that I am not going to read every um line of the each and every line of the book because it's too vast. I'll just explaining such things that is important, and you can make your answer by your own by understanding this. Okay, so let's go. So first is the definition of concept that the vulnerable child. What is called vulnerable child? The concept of vulnerability and the vulnerable child can be well understood by the following definition. That is, the vulnerable the vulnerable is defined by the Health Organization WHO, that is United Nations. What is that? That is United Nations Children's Fund, that is UNICEF. That is, the vulnerability is the state or condition being weak or poorly defended, which means those sections or those people are very weakly defended. They are not properly secured as other people, those sections, and that is they are called vulnerable vulnerable state. Notice that is called vulnerable state, which means that the condition of being weak or poorly defended. They do not have any specific or any kind of uh, spatial securities to them. The concept of vulnerability with regard to young people implies that one who are more exposed to risk than the peers. It means uh, it can be considered the people who implies ones who are more exposed, who those are facing much more difficulties than the other peoples. Okay, the people who are facing much more difficulties than the other sections of the people, who are not facing such kind of thing, like a poor guy who is facing from difficulties from of food, clothing, or such things, rather than the other peoples. Okay, so they can be vulnerable in terms of deprivation, food, like deprivation in terms of food, education, and parental care. Okay, and exploitation also, abuse, neglect, and violence, and infection with HIV. So these are the things that can be considered here. That is, they can be vulnerable. So let me tell you that what is vulnerability. Vulnerability means a poorly condition or a state of poorly dependent or weak. Okay, so the concept of vulnerability with the young people, that implies who are facing much more difficulties than the other peoples. Okay, and they can be vulnerable in terms of deprivation, like deprivation in terms of food, then education and parental care, then exploitation in various cases, such as in exploitation in the terms of uh, like physical exploitation or mental exploitation, or any kind of exploitations are there. Then abuse is also considered as a physical or mental. Then negligence and violence and infection with HIV. So a person who is deprived from food, education and parental care or a kind of security, they can be they are exploited and abused, then neglected, and always also violated, and also infected various kind of diseases. There are various factors which make the Indian children vulnerable. So, because we are studying the children part, that is the issues relating to children, so we will be discuss that how the children are getting how are the children are vulnerable in case of India. So the factors, various kind of factors that Indian children are vulnerable to expose to risk. Factors like illness, lack of education, identity, extreme poverty, and another major factor of the vulnerability. So in the most of the cases, the children are deprived from their for deprived their from food, education, and a good education, and suffering from illness, okay, and lack of identity, because suppose there is a orphan guy, or orphan child, so he is become from lack of identity, and also lack of education, because do not have education, or they don't know write and read, how he will be identified himself. Then extreme poverty is also one and kind of vulnerability. If there is a poverty, they might be suffering from vulnerability. Then according to UNICEF estimates, like 33 percent of population lives below the international poverty line in India, and around 28% of rural and 26% of urban population are living national poverty line, under the national poverty line. The alarming concept that young girls are vulnerable to anemia, malnutrition, and domestic violence. So that young girls in various sections, like in the rural areas and kind of things, in the extreme rural areas like that, they are suffering from anemia. This is deficiency of blood, and are suffering from malnutrition and domestic violence. So, in a nutshell, a concept of vulnerability refers to the group of people who are exposed to more risk than their peers, and they are separated from their parents. So, in a nutshell, in a short way, the vulnerability refers to a group of people or individuals who are exposed to more risk. They are suffering from more risks and difficulties, facing their difficulties than their peers, and are separated from their parents, that they are real vulnerable group. According to World Bank, orphan and vulnerable children, that is vulnerable are the group of children who experience negative outcomes such as loss of their education, morbidity and malnutrition, and higher rate of than the peers. The main categories of vulnerable children are such as the street children, or that is what are they called, slum areas, okay, which is also called as basti kind of thing. So that is called street children, and the children in the worst form of the child labor. Okay, and they who are suffering from child labor, that even they are forced to do labor, in kind of thing, or they are compelled to work and engage in work at their very early age, instead of reading books and playing with their friends. They are compelled to work for their family. Children affected by armed conflict kind of thing, that is which is called Santrasbad kind of thing. Um they are affected. They took the childrens from and they get into the armed conflicts, Then children affected by the various kind of diseases like HIV and AIDS. Then children living with disability, those child children are who are suffering from various physical and mental disabilities. They are also vulnerable from the societal view. And local orphan and vulnerable children. So the types of vulnerability. I hope the above sections you have understood that the definition and concept of vulnerable child, and in a nutshell, they are the who are exposed to more risk, okay, and than the peers and separated from the parents, and also they are the vulnerability is a condition that they are poorly defended and they are facing much more difficulties and exposed to much risk than their peers. So, the second concept is the types of vulnerability. Types of vulnerability. That is the concept of how many kinds of vulnerability is there. How the people are, how the children are suffering from vulnerability. And there are various kind of vulnerability are there, such as individual vulnerability, physical vulnerability or social vulnerability, economic vulnerability, environmental vulnerability, and attitudinal vulnerability. We will be discussing each concept in detail. Um so, first one is the social vulnerability or individual vulnerability. So, a human being is a social animal, and the society plays an important role in the social development. So, the positive and negative impact of the society affects the human being's holistic growth. Is it real? It is real, okay? Social vulnerability concept and how the vulnerable stressors affect the human life must be understood. One of the dimensions of vulnerability is related to multiple stressors, including abuse, social exclusion, and natural hazards, and the inability of people, organizations, and societies with hand and the adverse impact of the stress creators. So, social vulnerability what? Vulnerability means a kind of akshamta. Akshamta nahi. What is called that? वंचिता, जैसे हम कहते हैं वंचित या फिर I don't know what is the proper word that is used for vulnerability, but you can understand that. Okay, what I want to say. So they are suffer as a human being, as a social animal. They have to participate in social actions. Okay, and whatever societal impact is also affect the human growth and development. If there is a negative kind of running in the society, so it will be impact negatively in the human development, and same as a vice versa as if the positive action. So one of the dimension is called as multiple stress that includes abuse. If the society's persons are not um, accepting a person or a kind of group, they are maybe they are might to be called as vulnerable. The peoples are abusing him, and they socially excluded the sections of from the society, and also the come from the natural hazards and the inability of the people. So these are the kinds of social vulnerability, how a particular section is getting vulnerable from the holistic society. Then various the existence of peace and security, access to the basic human rights, system of good governance, social equality, and traditional values, customs, and ideological beliefs, and overall collective organizational systems, so that vulnerability is created through the interaction of social forces and multiple stressors are resolved through the social condition. So, when the flooding occurs, some citizens, such as children, elderly, differently abled, may be evacuated. It requires involvement of the local communities and strengthening the people's ability to help themselves. So, these are the kind of things that are socially vulnerable. They make socially vulnerable to them. Then second concept is the physical vulnerability. Physical vulnerability means the structure or the damage of collapse of building, non-structural damage and damage to contents, and structural damage to infrastructure. So if there is a direct loss of the assets in the society, physical like indirect losses due to physical vulnerability is the progressive deterioration of the damaged buildings and infrastructures which are not can be repaired. So there is a need of assessing the physical vulnerability of urban areas, but and the uh, rural area, the physical vulnerabilities are not be repaired by time. If area lies near to the coast lines, fault lines, and unstable hills, it also make an area to the vulnerable to disaster as compared to an area that is far away from the origin of the disaster. Physical vulnerability includes the difficulties in access to resources, means of communication, hospitals, police stations, fire bridges, fire brigades, roads, buildings, and in an area of the in case of disaster. So physical vulnerability mostly oriented to the infrastructural access to the vulnerable society. Okay. uh, is the, are they are getting full access to the water resource, communication, hospital, police station, and road, buildings, hospital, and are they getting full access to them or not? All the time the problematic constructions are like in various disasters or natural hazards, are they getting sufficient help, or are they getting help from the society, other people's is not, or no, they mostly consider here. Number three is the concept of economic vulnerability. Economic vulnerability is a kind of concept that is considers various factors such as population size, remoteness, merchandise export concentration, share of agriculture, forestry, homelessness, and natural disasters, kind of things. So these are the concept of vulnerability: economic vulnerability, cultural vulnerability, environmental. Are they getting proper environmental access or not? Are they expand the knowledge, energy consumption, so it's sustainability, water, etc. Then attitudinal. Attitude means the behavioral of actions toward the particular thing. There is attitudinal vulnerability among the people who will never try to accept any change. They are not accept a new change in their pattern. They are always outdated. They are always be with want to be with the outdated technology and outdated thought processes. They are not ready to accept new changes. So, what are the factors of the vulnerable associated with the vulnerable child? Okay. First one is the physical factors. Second one is economic factor, environmental factor, and social factor, and other major issues. Physical factor is the health. Okay, health and mental health and physical health. Is the children is not getting the proper access to this, like the wellness are not they are not from getting wellness, and the parts of the body continuously unhealthy conditions lead to the children's vulnerability. Then personal circumstances, physical disabilities, age, disabilities, cognitive and mental health difficulties, they are they are the major factors of a vulnerable of child. Economic factor is also there. If is not getting proper education, food, and healthcare services, they are suffering from economic vulnerability. Environmental, the low socioeconomic conditions, hunger prone societies are also directly affect the generation create the vulnerability. Social factors. Society is one of the best platforms for the overall growth of a child. A child is the most innocent being and deserve the best chances in life. Irrespective of their identity, therefore they are most vulnerable because of their age, and they are always at a risk of exploitation, getting abused. So there are social factors are there which are used, they used to abuse them. So, what are the major issues that the children are getting? First one is nutrition. Nutrition, inadequate nutrition. First one is nutrition. So mostly the children are getting nutritionally or malnutrition, suffering from malnutrition. So child labor is kind of major issue. Then child abuse, then child trafficking, and these are the sections are abuse, physical abuse, emotional abuse, sexual abuse, negligence. So these are the concepts you can write by your own. Nutrition. We all know the children's are the childs are tomorrow's future. A healthy child means a health with child with healthy mind and body without any disease. The healthy growth of a child starts from the mother's womb. So that which means the child's healthy growth and development depends on the mother's diet. Negligence of diet during pregnancy leads to the child's related growth, death, and defective formation of organs. Hence, a child's health depends on good nutrition. A good nutritional status can be achieved by providing a balanced diet. This is an essential for a proper dysfunctioning of a brain, development of brain, and also helps in proper use of hand, leg, and body parts. If the body is deficient of one or more nutrients, then it suffers from malnutrition. So, the early stage of child's growth and development requires proper selection of nutrients. There is a deep relationship of health and nutrition, such as absence of diseases, complete physical, mental, and social well being, healthy body and mind, physical capacities of the body, harmonious functions of organs, proper use of five senses like the child can be properly taste, smell, sight, sort, and hearing capacity, proper coordination of eye, hand, and mind, um, which means if the individual is looking towards a thing and want to touch that, his mind and hand um, cooperatively giving help to uh, put out the thing, then the stress free mind with a happy life. So if the nutrition first from the beginning to the birth and upbringing of the child, the nutrition should be the nutrition is plays a vital role for a child. If there is inadequate nutrition, so or he will be suffer from malnutrition and deficiency of nutrition, and cause the malnutrition. And it's also when the body does not get appropriate quantity of nutrition as per the body's requirement. And the undernutrition arises when there is insufficient intake of energy providing foods like bodybuilding foods like protein foods and zinc, magnesium kind of things, calcium, excuse me. Then overnutrition. If there is overnutrition, this will also cause imbalanced nutrition. Over the nutrition leads to overweight or obesity condition of wealth. Nutritional issues of child, that is poor physical development, poor mental growth, poor intellectual ability, poor school performance, weak immunity system, ill health, reduced appetite. Appetite means not feeling hunger, like to reduce the hunger. Lack of interest in food and drinks, and then retarded growth, and then not putting on weight and not having height as per age, changes in behavior, poor concentration, getting ill, and taking a long time for recovery. Then childhood obesity and weight problem, raising the emotional intelligence, fussy eaters. They are the short kind of things that are a child done. Then child labor. Child labor is one of the major issues in the child vulnerability. Children who are deprived of schooling potential and childhood become major group of vulnerable children. According to the International Labour Organization, child labor is defined as work that deprives children of their livelihood, their potential and their dignity, and that is harmful to their physical and mental development. Mentally, physically, socially, or morally dangerous and harmful to the children. It interferes with their schooling by depriving them from the opportunities to attend school, obliging them to leave school prematurely, or requiring them to attempt to combine school attendance with excessively long and heavy work. Particularly from forms of work can be a child labor depending on the child age, a type of work with hours of week performed and the conditions under which is performed. The worst form of the child labor is defined, that is in article 3, that is ILO convention of 182. That is, all the forms of slavery or in practices similar to the slavery, such as sale of trafficking of children, debt bondage, then serfdom, and forced of compulsory labor, including forced and compulsory re-equipment of children for use of armed conflict, then the use of procuring of or offering of a child of prostitution for production of pornography or pornographic performances, the use of procuring or offering the child's illicit activities, in particular for production of and trafficking of drugs as defined in international treaties. Work which is nature of the circumstances and which is carried out likely to harm for the health, safety or moral of children. These are the um, worst form of child labor that they are made to done and from the child that is defined by Article 3 and 182 Convention of ILO. So again, I am repeating that the all kind of slavery practices such as sale and trafficking of children, debt bondage, serfdom, and forced of compulsory labor, and including forced to compulsory re-equipment of children to armed conflict, or the using of procuring to the child and forcing to the prostitution and production of pornography as performances, and using of them like illicit activities, production of and trafficking of drugs and other kind of international treaties, and also the nature circumstances of the which is carried out to like to harm to health, safety, morals of the children. So these are the very kind of illegal activities that is defined by ILO.